Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. First of all, welcome, everyone. And thanks for being here this morning for our Crop and Forest Production Week. And this is our first day of the week. And today we'll be talking about some of the soybean research that we have done in the last few years for the first half an hour and then second half an hour. So I'll be presenting the first half an hour and second half an hour. Kyle Gustafson from Crop Improvement Association will be talking about uh, some of the laws and regulation of seed certification and what it all entails in certifying seed in South Dakota. So without further ado, I'm going to start my presentation. So title is Soybean Research Updates in South Dakota, and then I would like to acknowledge Jonathan Kleinjan, who has helped me in great deal to come up with some of the slides and data that he has also produced or obtained in the last few years. So here's a quick slide of, so we do have a crop performance testing program in South Dakota. And in previous years, you were probably used to seeing these little boxes in our state in multiple places. But last year, this is 2024 soybean trial. We only had conventional soybean trials in 2 locations last year due to some staff shortages and personal changes. One of the major changes was Dr. Kleinjan, leaving South Dakota SDSU for a different role in South Dakota Wheat Commission now. So, but we did have a conventional soybean testing in 2 locations, and there are folks out there who are interested in growing conventional soybeans and looking for more information on different management practices and also the varieties that perform well. So in these little boxes, you see there are 2 locations we did. One was a South Shore, 15 miles north of Watertown at the Northeast Research Farm, and in Brookings. So in Brookings, we had 25 lines of maturity group 0 and 1 tested at Brookings, and 11 lines of maturity group 2 tested in Brookings. The black font is the highest yielding within that maturity group. So that this one on the left in Brookings, the 65 is the highest yielding soybean variety among maturity group 0s and 1s in Brookings, and then 55, the green font, was the trial average. And similarly in the other box on the right side of the first box was 62 was the highest yielding line, and 53 was the average for that maturity group testing. And at the Southeast farm, Northeast farm, we only tested 0s and 1s. Of course, we don't do grow 2s up here. So 67 was the highest yielding variety, and then 53 was the yield trial average. And there are some, so this is the trend that you see how the soybean yield is moving over the years. So this is the crop performance testing programs average soybean yield from 2003 to 2023. It's 21 years of data. So there's 1 point for 1 year, and you see a slight increase, in trend, anywhere from 30 plus, in 2023, 2003 to about, I would say, a little below 60 in 2023. So this is kind of shows, how the yield trend is moving in South Dakota over the years and last 20 years. And these are the specific topics that I'll be touching today. Hopefully it won't be, I can get it done in time. But first, we'll talk about date of planting / fungicide study. Second was biological seed treatment, and then third one will touch base a little bit on planting population of soybean. So first, I'll be talking about date of planting, maturity group, and fungicide. You might see a little popping up a poll question here before I move into the further slides. Very simple question here. If you can just answer that, take a moment and answer that, that'd be awesome. So it's not surprising, I'm not sharing the results, but it's not surprising that most of you planted your soybeans from May 1st to May 15th timeframe, and then 20% or so did, later part of May, none in June, and surprisingly quite a bit, did in April, even first part of April, and 20% of you guys did, whoever answered the question did about second part of April, and that that number is what I have seen, and what I've seen, and what I've heard, and what I've experienced in the state is moving up. The planting in early is moving up, and there's always a question on when should I plant? Do I have any advantage if I plant early type thing? So we did a study in 2023. This is not 2024. Again, this is 2023 at the Northeast Research Farm here by north of Watertown here. So I did this in 2023. We had 3 different maturity group of soybeans and 3 planting dates in 2023. And then you can see that first one was first part of May, first half of May, 11th May, 24th May, and 6th June. And we wanted to push further, but but due to some other things, we couldn't go beyond June 6th. And the insurance cutoff deadline is also June 10th. So June 6th, we got the latest planting. And you can see the numbers there. So if you look at horizontally, for maturity groups 04s, so you have 32 bushel per acre, 33 bushel per acre, and 43 bushel per acre moving from 11th May to June 6th. So June 6th did the best. If you look at the 0.7s, did similar things. There's not much difference between 11th May and 24th May planting, but there's some difference when you plant it in June 6th, which was kind of surprising because we were expecting the early maturity group doing better. I would say early planting doing better than the later planting. It was kind of contrary to our thoughts, and it did show significant yield differences for planting dates, and which was kind of expected. We were expecting the other way around, and so if you think back and then look at think about the 2023 growing season, at least here in northeast part of the state, we had a decent amount of winter precipitation and good seed bed going into the spring, and a lot of early planting were done, but it remained dry, no precipitation in spring and early summer, no precipitation. We just relied on what we had in winter precipitation, and that remained dry and dry and dry. It remained dry all the way up to June. So finally we picked up some rain later part of the summer, and that helped their later planting date soybeans more than the early planting did. That is the justification or argument that I could come up with. Otherwise, we were expecting to see some of the early planting dates doing better than the June 6th planting date soybeans. So it's still largely dependent on the soil moisture and then the precipitation we get in the growing season. So we did the same trial in 2024. So if you look at the 3 maturity groups again, 04s, 07s, and 1.2s, and the situation was kind of reversed. It remained wet, it remained cooler. The soil temperature was cooler in the spring, early part of the spring. So we couldn't get into the field even before 23rd of May. So their first planting day was May 23rd, and second planting day was June 7th. And you look at the yield numbers across each maturity group or the averages. 23 May or the earlier planting did better than the later planting did this in 2024. So the conditions were reversed, so was the yield. So I want to make kind of saying that we still rely on temperature and soil moisture, and of course the the varieties and maturity group of course should be there, with the importance is there. And my intention was to see, or at least see, comparable numbers for the earliest maturity, earlier maturing group doing better when planted early, so that we can have some, when harvested early in the September, we can have some window in the September for the folks who would like to follow small grains or winter wheat after soybeans. So that was my intention, and then that intention was somewhat fulfilled in 2024, but not in 2023, because it's largely dependent on how the season turns out and when we get that dry period or the wet period or the ideal moisture conditions. So it's all weather dependent, what I've seen in the last couple of years. So there's another study done in planting date by fungicide by maturity group. April 28th, May 23. This Dr. John Kleinen did this in Brookings. So we had 4 varieties. and fungicide was applied at R3 stage, and there were through applications. So we'll see some results in that trial also. So this is how the field was laid out. So here's from 2022 in Brookings. So we had 4 different soybean varieties in 4 different maturity groups: 07s, 1.1s, 1.6s, and 2.1s. And the numbers that you see on the top is the yield average. The trial average, 64 bushel, 61 bushel for that particular planting date. Planting dates were April 28th, May 24, and June 10th. In the horizontal array on the bottom here are the planting dates, and then trial average for that particular planting dates are put on the top there. So if you just look at the April 28th, I would say, later planting did better than the later maturity group did slightly better than the earlier maturity groups. If you go to the May 24 planting dates, all the varieties did similar. And if you go to June 10th, the yields were significantly lower than the first 2 planting dates, but still, if you look at the individual variety within that planting date, they performed, similarly. And here's the same trial with treated versus non-treated, fungicide at R3 stage. And fungicide applied were the yellow bars, and untreated were the blue bars. So something that sticks out is right here. So 1.6 in April 28th kind of stuck out quite a bit, about 5 bushel more than the untreated ones. And if you look at the May 24th, there are some yellow bars going above the blue bars. But if you go look at the June 10th ones, the difference is narrower. What that's telling me is if you're planting early, maybe the fungicide will have some effects in yield than the later planting ones. So here's a response to fungicide: 2.3 bushel in the April 28th planting date. May 24 planting date is 2.5 and 1 bushel only for June 10th planting. So again, 3 years combined, 3 years, you see the similar results. Quite a bit of, a lot of higher yields for the early planting or the early planting or late April planting. When you combine 3 years, but if you look at just the higher maturity group or the 1.6s, it's not that far from the mid-May planting dates, but the yields go really down when you do when you go into June, and which is we've known for years. And if the soybeans doesn't like to, I mean, compared to corn, it's still soybean does quite a bit better, for later planting dates. But if you have something in decent time, good window in May, that always does better. And if you choose the right maturity group varieties. Yield by relative maturity 3 years. So everything combined together, how did all the maturity group performed? So the 0.7s in Brookings performed the worst, and then 1.1s and 1.6s and 2.1s did similar. So just the maturity group only didn't have any advantage if in this graph. That's what it's telling us. So data planting by fungicide study: early planting has potential but carries some risk. Consistent, these are the take-home message: consistent response to fungicide at R3 of 2 to 3 bushel if planted before June 1st, or the May planting. A lot of us do plant a lot of our soybeans in May. And full season maturity, in this case for Brookings, I would say anywhere from 1.5 to 2, still does better than the earlier maturity group beans. And we'll kind of move towards biological seed treatments. This is a large study results that I'm going to show you. Quick definition. We have heard quite a bit about biological products out there. So this was our effort to kind of answer some of that question. So definition: a substance or microorganism that, when applied to seeds, plant, or rhizosphere, stimulates natural processes to enhance or benefit nutrient uptake, nutrient efficiency, tolerance to abiotic stresses, or crop quality and yield. So there are a lot of things that can impact the ultimate yield, anywhere from nutrient uptake to nutrient efficiency, tolerance to biotic and biotic stresses, and crop quality. That means the quality of the plant and the seed that we harvest. And these are not really regulated in the United States. Type of biologicals we can broadly categorize in biostimulants. That's non-living, primarily stress mitigation. Microbes are microorganisms isolated from soil. So those are mostly, living materials that you can apply and expect them to do good to your crop. Nationwide study, South Dakota sites were in 2022 and 23 were Bath, Brookings, Miller, and Renner. And objectives were to see if there is any yield response after applying these as a seed treatment. Nationwide, 50 locations, 17 states in 2022, 55 locations and 21 states in 2025. So here are the list of products. I'm not going to go through each one of them that are applied or tested in these trials across the nation. So in results only of 2024, only 4 out of 50 sites reported significant differences in yield, and fortunately, one of the 4 sites was in South Dakota, Renner. So here's the Renner result. You see these products and then yield, and you have this, statistical grouping, I would say, from highest yielding. And if you see a same letter or the yield followed by the same letter, those are not statistically different from each other. So the yield ranged from 50 bushel to about 55 and a half. Combined locations 2022, all South Dakota locations. So Renner was the one that had some significant yield differences, and you have different letters. Everything was not significant at 95% probability, and all locations averages are in the last column. And it's 2023 again. So take home message again, only 10% of the sites demonstrated some sort of yield response in 2022, and 3 out of 25 in 2023. So there's a lot more to study still, and environmental conditions can be critical, to see these benefits, time of application, the temperature, the soil conditions, and expected, precipitation on the horizon. Those are the things that can affect the actual effect to see the effect of these, biological soil products. A lot of these things can do, a lot better, in a controlled environment like growth chamber or a lab setting or greenhouse setting. But once you go out in the, natural setting, things can be a little different, or the results may not be as expected as you think. And if you would try to test some or try some, do it, in a smaller scale, do your homework. I'm sure there are, a lot of things that will work in your environment, and there could be a lot that may or may not work. So try it in a smaller scale first. So I have these are the last part of my presentation, planting population. So this is just the image of the soybean plant for the 4 planting populations that were tested. So yield by planting population in Brookings 2016 and 17. So 60,000 to 180,000. You can see some yield benefit by increasing your population up to about 140,000 live plants. After that, you don't see that benefit by increasing your planting population. And there's always a, interaction study. So here's the interaction of planting date by population by variety. So planting population is 100,000, 140,000, 180,000, and 3 replications and 4 different varieties. And 3 planting dates, May 1, May 15, and June 2, which is about, I would say, the, ideal, soybean growing timeline in South Dakota. So 72 bushel for May 1st, average, 64 bushel for May 15, and 55 bushel for June 2nd. Planting date, And you have maturity groups from anywhere from 1.4s to 2.4s. And I would, still, I think we've seen in previous slides also that's 1.5 or 1.6, maturity beans are doing quite, better, at least numerically, and, if not statistically in a lot of different years and a lot of different experiments that's done in Brookings. So here's the May 1st, May 15, May, June 2nd, same thing with the relative maturity group. You have highest planting population as green bars, 140,000 is yellow and 100,000 is blue. And earlier planting dates, you have 180,000 doing better than the other two. And if you move further into the season, here's May 15 planting, then that, yellow bars are the 140,000 doing better than the other two. And if you move further into the growing, planting season, if you go June 2nd planting, then you have mixed. You don't really see a, trend, and there's some, at least in 1.6 is, 180,000 or high planting population did better yield than the others. And here's a May 1st planting, May 15 planting, June 2nd planting, and you have just averaged, planting population average yields are, if you go early planting, 180,000 or the higher planting population does better than the other two. But if you're going to May 15 or mid-May planting, you have the 140,000, and, June 2nd, there's it's almost indistinguishable yields for three different planting populations when you move further into the planting season. So in conclusion, is there a planting date by population interaction? Yeah, I think so. And in most cases, 140,000 is enough. And another thing to kind of keep a note when you're doing a planting population is if you have a history of white mold, later planting in lesser population could be better, so that you have, a little more air movement in that field within the rows. So these are the statements I should show when we do our public presentations. And here's my contact information. I don't hesitate to put my cell number here. So you have my email address, my office phone number, and cell number. And like I mentioned, this is my last slide. So, and I did mention Dr. Jonathan Kleinen's name. So if you have his information, would like to reach out to him and certain things, he's with Wheat Commission now. I mean, you can ask him wheat question or soybean presentation, whatever. So just reach out to us if you have any questions. And I will kind of minimize my slide to see if there are any chat or Q&A if you have any questions. So first question I see is, how do you want questions answered if you're a crop consultant? So I'm assuming the question, if I were a crop consultant, how do I answer questions to these topics that I presented? And a lot of times, so if you look at the data that we have obtained over the years, there's always I'm going to go with the planting date first, just the planting date. Which planting date is good? And it's always a tricky situation. If I were a crop consultant, I would say more of a, spread out if you can. Same with the maturity groups also. So that'll give us, and so that you're not putting all eggs in the same basket. And these are the location specific data. So, it may or may not reflect every location every year in South Dakota. So that's something to keep in mind. Was the 3-year study all performed in Brookings? Yes. And there's a link that Heidi put on for this year's soybean variety trial results on our website. So 3-year study was done in Brookings. And the first 2 planting date study I showed 2023 and 24 was in South Shore, South Dakota, or the Northeast Research Farm, SDSU's Northeast Research Farm by South Shore, about 15 miles north of Watertown. And I don't know if I answer all of your question. If 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 you have more questions or the follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to type it in. Yeah. So our next speaker is Kyle Gustafson from Crop Improvement Association, and Kyle, take it from here and then introduce yourself, and you're ready to go. I stopped sharing the screen so you can share yours.
David asked me to jump on this morning and just talk a little bit about the seed certification process, specifically from the Crop Improvement Association. And as David mentioned, my name is Kyle Gustafson. I started with the Crop Improvement Association last May. And a lot of you knew Dan Olson. He was a longtime assistant manager. He retired, and I took over for his role. So, just a little discussion around crop improvement and seed. When we talk about classes of seed that are produced, so everything that the crop improvement does is governed by the Federal Seed Act. And one thing that we know about seed is that you have breeder seed, which would be the seed that people like Carl Glover, Sunish Segal, Melanie Caffey, that would be the seed that they produce. Then it gets propagated at foundation seeds. So a lot of you probably have worked with Jack Ingemanson in the past. You buy foundation seed, and then there's registered, and then a lot of people will purchase seed for grain production in the certified classification. And when we talk about these, a lot of times most people's first encounter with seed is at the foundation level. And just for your knowledge, foundation seed is about the 10th to the 15th generation from the initial cross. So they have to get some of the homozygosity increased, especially in these self-pollinating crops. And when you purchase seed, um, like so from Jack Ingemanson, for example, you're going to get like bags that would have a white tag on it. And then what can happen is people that grow out the foundation seed, they can then resell it as registered seed, and then it can get regrown, and then it can get sold as certified seed. So even like for example, SD Ranger is a new oat variety that just recently got announced for release. So that's going to be sold as foundation seed. It's currently being sold as foundation seed, so it will be grown this coming year, 2025, as foundation seed. Then it gets grown out as registered, and in South Dakota, we have a registered, it's a non-saleable class for oats. That would actually get grown in 2026, and then certified seed won't actually be available until 2027. So oftentimes when a new variety gets released for small grains, uh, another example would be SD pheasant. It's been available from foundation seeds for 2 years, but this is going to be the first year where it's actually available as certified seed for farmers to purchase at the certified seed level. So, if people have interest in growing certified seed, they have to be a member of the Crop Improvement Association. We have a membership form. This is actually the old membership form. The information is actually on our website now, and it's a really easy form. You just go on our website, and that's where you fill out the application. Um, and we have different manuals for different certification processes, or if you want to become a member. This is probably one thing to note for anybody that has worked with crop improvement in the past is if you haven't worked with us for about 5 years or more, you'll notice that our processes are much simpler than they were in the past. We do everything, almost everything is done online now. You become a member online. You can apply for field certification. You can find all kinds of our references and resources online, but all of it is really streamlined on our website now, and that makes this entire process of seed certification for our farmers and for our seedsmen so much simpler to keep track of all of our records. We also keep track of disposition for how much seed different retailers and dealers have. That's all done online too. So when people apply for field certification, let's say that you bought foundation seed, this is what the application will look like. And I'm just going to do something once here because this kind of helps me out. So, anytime you apply for field certification, what's great is anymore we use it's an online platform where you can use mapping. You can map out your field. In this case, we have a field right here. Some of you that are Brookings natives or know Brookings, here's the fireworks stand. It's on Highway 14 northwest of Brookings. So there's a field right here. You can just go in, you can plug in that polygon, you can plug in your field, you enter in, what's the variety? In this case, it's Ascend SD. In this case, we're growing it for foundation seed. We have to put in our pass crop. We also have to put in our contact information. And this is beneficial for the growers because they can enter all their information in. And then this is also what our field inspectors see as well. So our field inspectors, we have about a dozen field inspectors across the state of South Dakota. A majority of them are kind of compacted in that central South Dakota and then up along the Highway 12 corridor of South Dakota. But our field inspectors, this is the form that they get, and this helps them see what the variety is. It helps them see what the past crop rotation is. And then this also gives them some of the off types that they're out there looking for when they go out and do the field inspection. So, when they're out looking for at field inspections, they're looking at field history. Like a good example would be if you want to grow spring wheat, you can't be growing a certified field of spring wheat on last year's spring wheat field. Likewise, you can't grow oats on oats. You got to have a crop rotation so that you can have pure seed when you're growing for the following year. The other thing we'll look at is we'll look at other crops and other plants. So some of you, it's kind of hard to see on this picture here, but like for example, this is a winter wheat field, kind of east of the Performing Arts Center at SDSU. And if you notice here, this spring wheat field it's just starting to head out, but you notice that there's rye in it. And this is one of those things that this is really well known in the world of production seed, especially for winter wheat. But if we find any rye in a certified field of winter wheat, it instantly gets kicked out of certification because we know that we cannot separate that rye out from the certified winter wheat. So like that would be one thing that our inspectors look for. They will also look for weeds. They'll look for off types, as I mentioned before. They'll look at crop mixtures. For example, if you're out looking at a field that's being grown for seed, you want to see a uniform field. If you see something like this here, where you've got stripes going through the field, that at least garners a conversation with the grower about, hey, was there two different planting dates? And if there's not two different planting dates, oftentimes the field will get kicked out because you've got two different varieties being grown out there. And we'll also look at isolation too. Any of these self-pollinating crops, small grains, soybeans would have need to have an isolation strip of 10 feet around the outside of them. Cross-pollinated crops, like for example, people that grow certified rye, it's about a quarter mile because of their cross-pollination. But that's what our inspectors are checking for. And then we'll also check for varietal differences too. So like, for example, we do soybean inspections too, mid to late summer. And when we go out, we'll look and you can tell a lot by a phenotype of a soybean just by looking at the color of the hair and the color of the pods and the colors of the hilums. We will actually go out and we'll check all that. And as long as they're all uniform, they'll go through our process and they'll get approved. Now, the farmers that grow the seed, they will get the field inspection report back, and you can see we'll check isolation. We take sample sizes so we can get off types. We look at the stands, the lodging. We always, when it comes to maturity, when we're out inspecting, most of our winter wheat is very close to harvest when we go out and inspect it, just so that we can look at color differences on it. We can also see head size differences. Spring wheat is generally spring wheat's about the same time frame too, and oats we usually inspect them a little earlier in their maturity process when they're still a little greener, when they're still standing. And then our inspectors will give us how many acres that they approved for a field inspection. And then, of course, there's the inspection status. If it's approved, it'll of course say approved. If it fails for some reason, it will list it down below. We also list the weeds that we find and if there's any variance out there too. So all of it is meant to give the growers more information about what's happening in their field. So then what happens is after the field inspection in the summertime, the farmer will then harvest that wheat, and then the wheat needs to be cleaned. So or the certified seed, excuse me, needs to be cleaned. And that can be cleaned by the individual farmer or seedsman, or it can be done through an approved conditioner. So in South Dakota, we have about 60 approved conditioners. Of those 60 conditioners, I'd say 80% of them are in state. We have a list in our seed directory. I'll give you a link to that at the very end. But those are people that we go out and we approve their conditioning system. We look at it. We make sure it's going to do a good job. We make sure it's high quality. And, for if you're not familiar with the conditioning process, this would be a video here where we can see here, these are oats being conditioned. So this is on an air screen where basically what's happening is we're using gravity coupled with air here, and it's basically just shaking. And you can see what happens is it separates out the good quality oats up there on the screens. As they get shaken over, small particles, small pieces drop through the screen, and down below there is where all the tailings and the screenings are being separated out. And most of our certified conditioners, this is just the basis of the machines that they use. The vast majority, you might be familiar with these as clipper machines. Crippen is another popular brand, and Bench Industries, they're the ones that that have these air screen machines. But then most of our certified conditioners will also have what's called indenters, where they will analyze or they'll basically separate seed out based on size. So if like oats are too long or too short, they'll separate them out so they create a uniform seed size. And then a lot of them will also run gravity tables too, which basically what a gravity table does is it separates out seed based on its test weight. So high quality seed kind of sifts to one side of the table, low test weight seed sifts to the other side. And as you can imagine, it's a popular machine for especially separating out, like when you get scab in wheat. It does a really good job of separating out scab. It also separates out ergot, and that's the reason why all of our certified seed has to go through a conditioning process, because we have to remove the weeds out of it. We have to remove low quality seed, anything that would be scabby, anything that's got ergot in it. We want to take that out so that it's not getting resold to other farmers. Both, it's not going to account for good quality seed. It's going to make the germination lower, and it could potentially reinfect the following field too. So once a lot of seed has been cleaned, we use, this is called our Form C here, which simply put, this is all of our inspectors are familiar with it, as are our certified conditioners. And then what our conditioners do is they'll just put their name in here, and they'll list out how much seed they have after they've cleaned it. And they also list their clean out right here. And this is an important point to make, is that, when it comes to conditioning seed, the majority of seed that gets conditioned from the dirty seed, it's probably, there's about 5 to 10% clean out on it. When you have really heavy scab, it can be as high as 30 or even 40% too. But this is just one of those things to note, that when it comes to conditioning seed, especially when you talk about certified seed, a lot of times you can take, like I said, 5 to 10, 15% right off the top. A lot of that's because that's dirty tailings that needs to be cleaned out of it. Now, the last step in the certification process is we have seed testing. So we work with the SDSU seed testing lab. And again, all the testing that we do is done through the Federal Seed Act. It legislates what we need to be doing from a standpoint of testing. It must meet basic standards, and it must meet requirements for labeling. So everything that we put on our testing is done specifically so that it can be relabeled as foundation registered and certified seed. So when we talk about, the testing that we do, we have in the dirt sampling and we have clean samples. So simply put, in the dirt that's basically seed that is coming, it could be fresh off the combine. And you might be wondering, well, why on earth do you test for dirty samples? The quick answer is because it's specifically that's a popular test for winter wheat, because you think about, most winter wheat is harvested in mid to late July, maybe even early August at the latest, and then it's generally turned around and it's getting replanted again 6 to 8 weeks later. So people will use an in the dirt sample so that and basically it's a simple, we do a genetic test on it, we do a germ test on it, we do a seed count on it. It's just some very quick descriptive tests to help us determine whether or not that seed is even high enough quality that they should even put it through a conditioning process. It helps our seedsmen determine whether or not the seed is even good enough that it should go through a conditioning process, because if it's not good enough, then it just gets marketed and sold as grain. Then we have the clean samples, and this is what every sample must have, whether it's winter wheat, spring wheat, oats, whatever people are putting through for certified seed. We have to have a clean set of samples. So like I mentioned, so in the dirt seed test, we run a germ test on it. We also run an HPLC. Some of you might know that as a gel test, and what that simply is, that's a genetic test. We test the seed for proteins in it, and we can test it against known samples. So like, for example, if you're trying to grow Ascend SD spring wheat, you'll send in a sample and we have a known genetic profile of what Ascend SD should look like. We'll test it. We'll test your sample. We'll test our check sample. And as long as the protein profiles match, we can say, yes, we know that this is Ascend SD. We can confirm it can continue through the process. Then we also run a seed count on that too. Now, those are the in the dirt samples. On the clean samples, there again, we'll run a germination, and oftentimes we'll rerun a germination test if a dirty sample is really low. So one thing to note is the minimum germ test for any certified small grains is 80%. But the vast majority of people, if they don't have a number 90% or above, they'll reclean it until they can get the germination levels higher. And oftentimes that's what'll happen is people will test in the dirt and they'll have a germ test that's in the 80s. They'll request that we re-germ it after they clean it because the germination will be higher because they've gotten rid of some of that poor quality seed. You don't have to rerun a gel test if you ran it on a dirty sample, because if we already ran the dirty sample and it was genetically pure, we know the clean sample is still going to be pure. We'll do a seed count. There again, a lot of times we'll redo a seed count because now that the profile is cleaner, we'll relook at that. We do run a noxious weed exam. That's just common sense. You can't resell seed that's got noxious weeds in it. We'll check for purity too. We'll do test weight, protein, and moisture content on grain as well. So all of it is just meant to give us a good descriptor for what that seed will look like. And this is what ends up, this is what you get. Now, this is a bulk transfer certificate, but same idea as what you would get for if you'd have tags made. We've got our variety. In this case, it's SD Midland. It's hard red winter wheat. It's foundation seed in this example. We've got lot number, which is what Jack would be using at foundation seed. We've got the certification number, which is what crop improvement uses to track seed. It says how much the person purchased, whether or not it's treated with a seed treatment. And then we have all those seed tests put over here. So all of that is put on there just to disclose information about that seed lot. Now, the last thing we do is we manage inventory for the different people. And this is where we have bulk retail facilities. And part of the reason why we have bulk retail facilities is it's less to make sure they're doing a good job of storing the seed. It's more so that we just have access to their inventory so we know where all the certified seed is being sold, and we can track that. And the reason why we track that is because we collect research fees on all of our varieties. So for example, South Dakota Public Varieties, we are the organization that manages and tracks all of the research fees for our public varieties. And basically for South Dakota Public Variety, the first $200,000 that's made on it, 75% of that goes to crop improvement. And we use that money for both for operating costs, just to keep our field inspectors. We also will also give funding back to the Department of Plant Science in the form of different research. You know, if they need a new tractor or they need a new planter or they need a new combine, we'll help fund that. And the other 25% goes to SDSU. Then after a variety has made $200,000, then it flips. Then crop improvement keeps 25%, SDSU keeps 75%. And then, of course, they'll use that for the College of Ag, Department of Plant Sciences, and then some of that money goes directly up even higher. And a lot of times they'll use that for scholarships. So along with South Dakota varieties, we also collect for surrounding states, North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, and Iowa are other popular states that have public varieties that are grown in South Dakota. And simply put, again, we manage those varieties as well. And we collect up 10% of their royalties, and then we send the other 90% back to Minnesota Crop Improvement Association or the North Dakota Seed Association. And then for public varieties, Westbred, AgriPro, Lima Grain, just to name a few. We collect a 10-cent private or a 10-cent research fee on those varieties as well. And that's mainly just to maintain our operating costs for field inspections that go behind that. And that's one thing to note too, is that we do, a lot of times people assume that we only work with public seed, but we have a lot of private companies that they grow seed in the exact same manner as public varieties, where they go through, they have certain seedsmen that they allow to grow foundation registered and certified seed, and we go out and inspect those varieties just like we do public varieties as well, because those companies want to have high quality seed as well. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't completely understand is, what exactly is plant variety protection? So PVP, simply put, is it's kind of like a patent, but it's on a variety. So it gives the initial breeder or the initial company that bred the seed, it gives them a 20-year license to be the only person that can grow and or manage the distribution of that seed. So, like for example, PVP, you can technically save seed that's under PVP if it's legal, if it's acquired through legal off, and you got authorization from the owner. So a lot of public varieties, you can technically buy it as certified seed, and you can turn around and you can regrow it for your own use in the future. Then we have PVP Title 5. So Title 5 just simply means that it always has to be sold under the original name that you purchased it. So if I bought a Send SD spring wheat from Foundation Seeds, I couldn't grow it out and rename it Kyle's Super Amazing Awesome Spring Wheat Variety. It would have to be resold as a Send SD. And then the last category is patents, and seed that has patents on it. A lot of times you would know this as certain certain types of seed that might have a trait associated with it. Maybe it's like a herbicide tolerant trait. Those would be varieties that have that kind of a patent on it. They can't be saved for seed. You'd have to purchase it all 1 year, sell it as grain. The next year, you couldn't bin run any of that. You'd have to go back and rebuy it again and use it. So just one thing to note, I mean, a lot of well, basically almost every variety that we work with in small grains has PVP and or Title 5 associated with it. How do you know if a variety has PVP? Well, one of the easiest ways is to look on the documents, label. If there's a bulk seed certificate, it will tell you if it's got PVP. We have our seed directory as well. And then I actually put a QR code down here at the bottom. It links to the USDA. That's the website that I like to really use for determining seeds, if a seed has plant variety protection associated with it. All you do is you go to that website, and there's like a bar right in the middle, and you just plug in what the variety's name is. And if you find it on that website, it's got PVP, and the PVP gives 20 years of protection from the initial date that it's issued. This is a full list of all the varieties that we work with that have PVP associated with them. I want to say that of everything that we work with, well over 95% of everything that we inspect has plant variety protection associated with it. So this is one of those things that we understand very, very well, that this is part of the value of certification, is managing the plant variety protection, managing the inventory of that seed. And then this is our grower directory. So we just came out with this here about a month and a half ago. So to access the current directory, here's our QR code right here. But this lists all kinds of information related to certification. So we list varieties, where you can find them. We have our certified seed conditioners. We have our certified bulk retail facilities. We list our directors for the Crop Improvement Association. Just all kinds of good information. There's some agronomy information in there. David mentioned he was talking before about some of the CPT data. So some of that CPT data gets summarized and gets put in different charts in our guide as well, related to agronomy properties for oats and spring wheat. Um, when it comes to crop improvement, when it comes to our board of directors, so we are technically a nonprofit organization. We are associated with SDSU, but we're governed by our board of directors. So we have 12 members. 10 of them are voting members. So we have 6 regional directors. So our state is divided into 3 regions. If you were to go from Brookings to Pierre on Highway 14, basically everything south of Highway 14 is one region. Everything north of Highway 14 is a second region. And then if you were to draw a line from Selby down to about Winter, everything west of that is a third region. So each region has 2 directors. And then we have 4 at-large directors, which oftentimes are people that want to continue serving on the crop improvement board of directors. They'll become an at-large director. So that's where 10 of our members come from. And then we do have 2 non-voting members. So the dean of the College of Ag and Bio, so that would be Dean Cassidy, and then the executive director, which would be Neil Foster. They both serve on the board as non-voting members. One thing to note too is that we are, while we're a state organization, we are a member of the American Association of Official Seed Certification Agencies. So we work with other states, North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Colorado. We work closely with all of them when it comes to putting out certification paperwork, when it comes to approving new varieties for certification. We all work together on a national scale. And for different resources, you can find all these on our website. But if you want to learn more about, hey, maybe I'm a grower and maybe I'm kind of interested in growing certified seed, we actually have a seed grower manual that's in our manual handbook section. It lists out some of the information, some of the requirements. We also have guides on there for trying or applying for seed certification, for field certification, which, by the way, it's very, very easy to do. It's not hard to do at all. One rainy afternoon, you can probably knock out almost all your fields if you want to apply for certification. And then we also have information related to varieties with research fees. We have newsletters, we have cooperating agencies, and that's another thing too, is we work with a lot of different government agencies too. If maybe you want to send seed overseas, for example, we have a very specific process we have to follow to make sure that we give you the right tags for where your intended customer is located. And then we'll also put our due dates too, if you're looking at field certification. So, for more information, check out www.sdcrop.org or give us a call. Neil's our executive director. Joyce, if you know Joyce, she's kind of the real boss. She takes care of all the work and she's excellent. Or you can give myself a call as well. There's all of our phone numbers. And I know we're coming right up on 10 o'clock here, so I'm going to stop. I think I maybe have a minute or two if anyone has any questions, but I will stop there.
Thank you, Kyle. I haven't seen anything on Q&A or the chat.
Perfect. While we're waiting, I'll scroll back up and I'll re-put
Yeah.
up our QR code to the directory, just because this is where a lot of our information is located. And you can pick these directories up at our office, but most people just use the online version now.